Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Bookends and Books. This video is a wrap-up video of what I read in August. We are in September and there's a new event starting, Framed, where we invite you, because I'm one of the hosts, we invite you to read about art. So before I plunge into that theme, I'm going to wrap up the month of August. I've read quite a few books in August. Some of them I cannot talk about because they were books for the BookTube prize. I still have one book left to read. And other books I've already talked about. I started the month by reading a few category romance for Garb August. So the books in this video are the other books, the ones that don't fit either category. They're not romance and they are not books for the BookTube prize. So that leaves me with 2 nonfiction books about faraway places and 3 fiction books written in French, though one of them is a translation from Chinese. So that one is definitely available in English. And then of the other 2 books, there's one that is available in English and one that is not. So I'm just going to keep that one for the end. So I'm going to start with the 2 nonfiction that are in English and about faraway places. The first one is A Polar Affair by Lloyd Spencer Davis. So the subtitle is Antarctica's Forgotten Hero and the Secret Love Lives of Penguins. So this book is part history, part nature book. The author is a biologist. He studies penguins. That's what he does for a living. He studies penguins. And the reason he chose that job is that he wanted to go to Antarctica. That was his childhood dream, his fascination. He wanted to go to Antarctica. And the way that he found to do that was to study biology and particularly animals that live in Antarctica, and that was penguins. And for many years, he published papers and he thought that he was the first one to make these observations, such that penguins are gay. Sometimes that male penguins can mate with other male penguins, or that penguins will try to mate with dead penguins, or that penguins will attack a bird that is injured and try to mate with it, basically gang rape a penguin. Penguins, when it comes to reproduction, they don't have a lot of morals, contrary to the Victorian image that we have of penguins who mate for life and basically live a good little middle-class kind of life. It's a bit ridiculous when you think of it. So anyway, for many years, he thought he was the first one to make these observations. But then in 2014, there was a paper that was published. It was a paper that had been found in archives, and it was a paper by Murray Levick, who was part of an expedition to the South Pole in 1912. Scott's expedition, the doomed expedition, the one that did not succeed to get to the South Pole first and did not succeed to come back everyone alive. Murray Levick was stuck for 1 full winter in Antarctica, and I suppose to relieve the boredom, he observed penguins and he wrote something about it. And he observed the exact same thing that Lloyd Spencer Davis observed decades and decades later. But for some reason, he never published his findings because they went against the morals of the times, some sort of self-censorship, I guess. So in this book, Lloyd Spencer Davis tries to find as much as he can about Murray, I've already forgot the name, Murray Levick. I said it a second ago. So he tries to find as much as possible about Murray Levick and why he went to the South Pole and what happened to him and why he did not publish after that and things like that. So this book is part history. So the history of the expeditions to the South Pole, the race between Amundsen and Scott, how come Murray Levick ended up having to spend a full winter in Antarctica. Basically, Scott's expedition had received funds not just to try to be the first to reach the South Pole, but also for scientific research, because officially that was the excuse for all these adventurers and explorers. It was scientific research to learn to know our planet. And so part of the expedition was sent north. So they accosted, there was a base camp in Antarctica, and then there was a group that was supposed to stay there, a group that was supposed to go south to the South Pole. That was the group led by Scott himself, and then there was a group that was supposed to go north to make some observations, and that group that was going north was supposed to be picked up by a ship at a certain point, but they missed their rendezvous, so they got stuck there for the entire winter, and they survived. They survived. They were 4 or 6 of them, I've already forgot. Anyway, they survived, and during that time, Murray Levick, who was the biologist of the expedition, decided to observe penguins because he did not start wanting to observe penguins. He wanted to observe different types of species, like sorts of fish, I guess, or birds. Well, penguins are birds, but other types of birds. And he ended up observing penguins. And that's what we get in this book. I have to say, reading about Antarctica during a heat wave, it does wonders. It kept me very, very cool because we get a sense of the cold, a sense of the extreme of the climate in Antarctica, of the extreme terrain, of the extremely harsh conditions there. We got a sense of the adventure, the race between Amundsen and Scott. We had a sense of the penguins. I know penguins a little more than I did before reading the book. So it was really an awesome read. I really, really enjoyed this book. I highly recommend it. And then another book about a faraway places, though that one much, much, much hotter. This is Inside Qatar, Hidden Stories from One of the Richest Nations on Earth. So Qatar is a small country, a small peninsula on the Arabic Peninsula. The capital is Doha, and it was the host of the latest World Cup of soccer. So in 2022, it hosted the World Cup. The World Cup is basically the reason why the author decided to study Qatar. I say studied, so this is not a travel book per se. This is an anthropology book. The author is an anthropologist, and he decided to study Qatar society as much as he could, because as he says at the beginning, his situation naturally imposes limits on what he can and cannot learn, the people he can and cannot talk to. So Qatar is particular in the sense that only 11% of the population living in the country is of Qatar nationality. All the others are foreign workers. Some of them work in homes, so the majority of female foreign workers work in domestic help, and many others are from Africa or Southeast Asia, not Southeast Asia, but South Asia, like Nepal and India, and they come to work in construction and do some physical labor that the Qatar population, the Qatar nationals, will not do. The country is so rich because of oil, because of natural gas, that the citizens can get cushy jobs, and they get paid astounding amounts of money to do basically nothing. So not all of them do that, but many of them elect to do that. So that leaves that all the other real work, I'm going to say, has to be done by foreigners. But to make sure that the money stays to Qatar, the foreigners can never get the Qatar nationality. Even if you were born in the country, you don't get the nationality. Even after several generations, you still don't get Qatar nationality. It's a society that is very, I'm going to say divided, but not divided in the sense that we say the United States is divided. It's not like that. It's very, there are levels, castes. I guess it's some sort of castes. So you have the Qatar nationals at the top, and then you have foreign workers, but like the European ones, the white ones, the Western workers. And then in third place, you may have, I don't know exactly, other Arab workers, well, probably, yes, I guess from Arab countries, and then it just goes down the pyramid like that. And the separations are kept not necessarily by a law, but by society. People don't mix. The Qataris don't want to mix with the foreign workers, and the foreign workers don't mix with the Qataris. And if you're a foreign worker of a certain class, like let's say an educated Western European who goes to, I don't know, teach in Qatar, you will probably never mix with workers who are building the stadiums for the World Cup, things like that. So the author tried to meet as many people as he could, but because of these natural limits, I'm going to say natural because they're not imposed by the law, but they are not necessarily natural, but the limits that he encounters, he could not necessarily interview as many people as he wanted to, or get to know as many aspects of life in Qatar as he wanted to. He acknowledges at the beginning that it's going to be very difficult for him to talk to women. The reality of women in Qatar, it's very difficult for a foreign man to get to know it. He did manage to speak to a few domestic workers, to a few women working in hospitality, but that's basically it. He cannot really talk about what maternity is in Qatar. He cannot really talk about what it means to be, I don't know, a Qatari woman with traditional obligations, but truckloads of money to go with it. He doesn't know that because he hasn't talked to a Qatari woman. So we get to the point of view of various foreign workers, taxi drivers, construction workers, small businessmen who are trying to find a way to make money in Qatar. And he shows how some people find a way in the system, how it's advantageous to them. But also he shows all of the inequalities of the system. And anyway, it's an absolutely fascinating book. I didn't know anything about Qatar except that it hosted the World Cup and that it was rich because of oil. I really didn't know much about Qatar, and after reading that, I get a much more human perspective on the country. So I highly, highly recommend it. My only issue with the book is the book itself. It's the stiffest thing I've ever read, in a long time. To open it, normally I just do this. I don't really open the book more than that to read it, but I could not for this one. I had to crack it open, and I mean crack because the spine is already all wrinkled after a single read, and it's a library book, so I really don't know how long it's going to survive in the library. But anyway, it's absolutely fascinating, and I highly recommend it. Now I'm moving on to fiction. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Love in a Fallen City by Eileen Chang. Now the title here is in English. The book is in French. I suppose I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the original title of the book in Chinese is also in English. I suppose that's the only reason to put an English title to a book in French, to a translation from the Chinese. It would be utterly ridiculous if the title of the book was something in Chinese and the French translator decided to translate it in English. So I'm going to assume that the original title is actually Love in a Fallen City and not some sort of Chinese equivalent. So Eileen Chang is an American Chinese writer. This is, I believe, her first publication. I think it's her debut. It's a novella. So in this book, I have two stories. I have Love in a Fallen City, and then Hasiao is Sad in Autumn. I'm translating word for word. I don't know what the original title is, so that one too is translated from the Chinese. So Love in a Fallen City, it's about 100 pages. It's a novella. So I read this for Women in Translation Month. And this is set in the 1940s, early 1940s in China. And we are in a traditional family that used to be rich and respected, but somehow has fallen on hard times. And our main character is a woman who is divorced. She left her husband because she was tired of getting beaten. But her family didn't somewhat welcomed her back, but not really. They blame her for having left her duties, and now they are hoping that she's going to marry someone else. And there's also a younger sister who has high hopes of marrying a rich young man who had just come into his inheritance. He studied abroad. He is British educated. So in a way, he's a bit of a foreigner, but at the same time, he's not. And that's the beginning of the story. And I thought it was super interesting. It was very rich in atmosphere. I got the sense of decay, I'm going to say, of the Republic. Is it the Republic in 1940s? Is it the Chinese Republic? Yeah, I guess it's the collapse of the old world, of the old world order in China. And at the same time, there's World War II that is coming very quickly. So it's fallen in two senses, the fallen city in two different senses, in two different meanings. And it makes for a great read. So this is the classic of the 20th century. A couple of years ago, I made a list of 100 modern classics I could read, and that was on my list, and I made a good choice. It was a good choice. It was good. Next is a reread. The title in English is The Fairy Gunmother. I think it's a brilliant translation. It's a brilliant translation of the title. The author is Pennac. So this is the second in the series of The Scapegoat. I reread The Scapegoat a few weeks earlier, and now I've decided to reread this one. And it's hilarious. It's really funny. There's a bit of a mystery going on. There are murders that are being committed in Belleville, in the old ladies who are being murdered, and there's a bit of an investigation going on. And of course, our scapegoat is kind of stuck in the middle of it, as always. He's always getting the blame. Yeah, we just get the sequel of his adventures, and it's so funny. It's just nice to reread this. I read this for the first time when I was in my early 20s, perhaps, not even early 20s, end of teens, something like that. I was in college, university when I started to read those, and I loved them at the time. I really loved them, and for some reason I've never reread them. And earlier this summer I reread the first one. I loved it, and now I've decided to reread the entire series. So I suppose the others are going to come in future videos, because I think I'm going to reread them all. And lastly is a book that is not translated in English. This is Manuel de la vie sauvage by Jean-Philippe Guérard. So on August 12th, there's a tradition that we are invited to buy a book by a Québécois authors. Now, of course, I always stretch Québécois to French Canadian because I don't want to limit myself to the province of Quebec. So I bought a bunch of books on that particular day, on August 12th. And this is one of them. So this one, the author is Québécois. I believe he's from Montreal. I don't know exactly. And I read another book by him. The previous book that I read by him is also not translated. It was Royal, and that previous book was about a student, a law student in Montreal, and he had a very high opinion of himself, and it was really a bit of a dude bro. And the narrator in that other book was absolutely detestable. I loved to hate him, and despite that, I had a lot of sympathy for him at some point, and then he does something and you just want to slap him. And I really liked that style of narration. And this one is in the same vein. So our narrator in this book is the owner, the brain behind a startup company. And he has created some sort of AI tool, and it's a bit evil, but of course the narrator doesn't think he's evil. He's presenting his point of view. So this is the excuse of the book is kind of a self-help book. So if you bought this book, I'm going to tell you how I made it, and so there's a bit of self-help in there, but when I read that, it sounded a bit more like a TED Talk. So that's what I was imagining. This guy giving a TED Talk about his experience and what he did, and how he became the person he became, and how he ended up where he is. And throughout that, of course, it's filled with scenes from the past, showing how he got to where he is. And again, we have a narrator, a total dude bro narrator, for whom success is everything, who has principles, but somehow the principles are flexible, for whom every relationship is a transaction. That is the main aspect of this book. Every relationship is a transaction. You get something out of it, and if you're not careful, you're going to lose more than you're going to get. And people are worth to know only if they can bring you something, and that's the general tone of the book. And again, I absolutely loved it. The narrator is detestable. I hated him, and I enjoyed hating the narrator. So I'm receiving, okay, sorry, I've just seen on my phone, I'm filming on my phone, I'm receiving text messages, and I know that there's spam. It says, thanks for the gift. I didn't give anything to anyone. Anyway, so whoever is behind the spam, I hate them as much as I hated the narrator of the book. And it was just absolutely lovely. I adored it. And I could see this becoming a movie. This could easily become a movie. So I hope that this author is going to get translated in English at some point. Yeah, it's a voice that we don't hear much. We hear a lot of Yeah, for some reason, no, not for some reason, for historical reasons, we've always associated literature mainly with white men, which is true and was true for a long time. And I think at the moment it is not quite true anymore. Many of the writers are women. Many of the writers are not white. They are from other cultural backgrounds. We give voice to all these new voices. But somehow the dude bro, it's also a new voice. And we don't really get any, again, thank you messages. Thank you for the gift. I didn't give anything. I was saying, we don't get enough of these dude bros in literature. And I think this is giving a voice to dude bros. It's mocking them. It's mocking them a little bit, because at the end of the book, it's clearly the narrator is completely in the wrong. And same thing for the previous book that I read. Clearly the narrator is completely in the wrong. But I think, nevertheless, this could be extremely interesting to young men readers, to readers who are young men. I think they could see somewhat a little bit of themselves in there, just a little bit, not the nasty part, but perhaps the ambitious part and the cynical part and the person, the ambitious part, and perhaps see where not to go, some choices not to make. So anyway, I absolutely adored it, and I hope it's going to get translated, and I'm going to read more books by this author. Sometimes I wonder, is it the name of the author that makes it impossible for him to become translated in English? I can only try to imagine some sort of booktuber, English speaking only, trying to say Jean-Philippe Guérard. I mean, yeah, his parents did not help him become a superstar. Anyway, that's it. That's the last book I wanted to talk about. So that's it. That's what I've read in August, and starting from now, I'm going to focus a lot of my reading on art books. So fiction that have artists in them, or non-fiction about art of various sorts. So thank you everyone for watching. Let me know in the comments if you're interested or if you have read any of these books, and I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine!